When turning a page in Scripture, sometimes you turn a page and it's just the next day, and sometimes you turn the page and it's 400 years later. That's what happens when we flip the page and we go from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And that's what happens this week as we're going through the Bible in a year as a church, and last week we were at the end of the Old Testament. This week we are at the beginning of the New Testament. What happened in between? This was something I just hadn't really thought about till I got to seminary, and it turns out a lot happened in between. And it's not something that tends to come up in preaching, so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about this. And this is not a sermon, it's just a few comments about what happened in between, because it really is important. It sets the stage for what happens in the New Testament. So as the Old Testament is winding down, we see that the second temple has been built. The Jewish people, some of them have come back from exile, and they have rebuilt the temple and rebuilt the wall. It's 538 BC. And the Jewish kingdom will be under be a Persian vassal, you might say, from that time when the temple was rebuilt in the 530s BC until 334, when someone you've heard the name of before, Alexander the Great, conquers this part of the world. And Alexander the Great, he conquers this part of the world in 334, and then he dies very shortly thereafter. And Alexander is really great at conquering. He's not great at naming an heir. He died very young. He did not have a clearly delineated heir. And so all the land, all the territory he had conquered were split between multiple people. And it was a mess. It was just a mess. The Jewish homeland, the Jewish kingdom, ends up being under the control of the kingdom of Egypt then from 300 to 200 BC, for about a century then. The kingdom of Egypt being ruled by the Ptolemy dynasty, the Ptolemy dynasty being headed by a dude named Ptolemy, who was a Macedonian connected to Alexander the Great. And so that happens from 300 to 200. And then what happens is that, so then if you think about the geography, Israel is being controlled by Egypt to the south. And then at about 200, from 200 to 160, the control changes. So it is controlled by the Macedonians, which is up the north. Alexander the Great was a Macedonian. Macedonia is the land that's just north of Greece. So they're Greek-ish, broadly speaking. And so we've had Persian control, 539 to 334. Then we had Egyptian control from 300 to 200 as one of these, someone connected to Alexander controlled Egypt and that area, and then switches hands up to Macedonian control from 200 to 160. And that's when, in 160, that's where things kind of get interesting. Because one of these Macedonian rulers puts a statue of Zeus in the temple in Jerusalem. And this goes about as poorly as you would expect. Very poorly. It causes a revolt led by the Maccabees, a set of priest warriors, you might say, who then turn into priest kings. The Maccabean revolt is where we get Hanukkah, as they rededicate the temple, but there's a special oil they've got to mix up. I forget the exact recipe for it. It's in Scripture. It is the oil for use in worship at the temple. And so the oil that's supposed to last one day lasts for as many days as there are candles on the menorah. I think it's 8 days. And so that's the miracle of Hanukkah. And so the Maccabeans rule for a century, 163 to 63, at which point they have grown arrogant. And some internal dissent is brewing in the Roman Empire, modern day Italy. The Roman Empire or the Roman Republic actually at this point. The Roman Republic wants Israel to be a vassal state. They come in looking for partners, but they're not looking for equal partners. What they're looking for is a junior partner. And so they find the Herod family, begins the Herodian dynasty. They're willing to rise up and play ball with Rome and be the junior partner. And Herod, and they call all their family members Herod, takes control over Israel with heavy Roman support. And that's what happens from 63 on through the end of the New Testament. And so this is a lot of change very quickly. Most of the times that have happened in the Old Testament, it's been multiple century phases, so to speak. This time period, these 400 years, have gone from Persian control to invasion from Alexander, to Egyptian control, to Macedonian control, to Maccabean control, down to Roman control. And so this has been a lot of upheaval very quickly, nothing lasting more than about a century, other than that Persian control right at the beginning. And so, and as we're heading into the New Testament times, Herod in 18 BC, one of the people in the Herodian lineage, Herod, this one is Herod the Great of the many Herods, he expands the temple, and it's a power play. He expands the courtyards, add government buildings, government structures, and so he is sort of marking his claim as the man who built it. So you have first temple, second temple, and the second temple almost has a second phase where it's the temple of Herod. It's such a dramatic renovation that it sort of becomes a entirely new temple in a sense, Herod's temple. And then to look at what changed with all of these things moving, all these moving pieces, what changed among the Jewish people is that there was a shift from being the 12 tribes to being the Jewish people. That's when this really happens. The 12 tribes sort of passes as each tribe being its own functional political unit. Now it's the Jewish people. And the Jewish people are in diaspora. That's the term for the scattering that happens. The Jewish people, a lot of them are in Egypt, where they ran to get away from the Babylonian invasion. A lot of them are in Babylon, who did not come back from exile. A lot of them end up in various other parts of the empire. And so what happens once you have Jews sort of scattered around from North Africa to Southern Europe to where we think of Israel today, sort of the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, is we have a shift in the focus of worship. Worship had been very focused on the temple. Show up to the temple, make your sacrifice. The priests are in charge of this sacrificial system. Well, if you're settled down as a Jewish family in Egypt, or over in Greece or over in Italy, you're not getting to the temple on a regular basis. And so worship had become localized to something we would start to recognize, something less focused on sacrifice and more focused on Torah reading, Torah studying, and prayer. So worship is shifting, and also the nature of authority had shifted as well. For most of the Old Testament, definitely from King David onwards, the power was understood to be held by king, priest, and prophet. King, executive power; priest, sort of this religious power; prophet, the one who shows up and says we got to get back in line with what God calls us to do. And that had shifted as the political reality had shifted. So by the time of the New Testament, the power was held by scribes and scholars and rabbis. It was not. It was people leading through study and their understanding and their ability to be wise in the ways of Scripture. So that is what happens between the Old and the New Testament, the intertestamental period that sort of sets the stage for what will happen next.